Welcome friends to another r/IDontWorkHereLady video. Nobody likes a Karen confusing somebody for an employee, but one thing I do like are all the amazing people that hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by OldCatLady99. Mom confused a guy for a waiter. I've been reading this sub for years and finally witnessed someone confusing someone for an employee. Went to dinner tonight with my mom and my nephew. Approaching the restaurant, Mom approached a guy in a t-shirt and shorts and said that she had a booking for Carrie, my mom's name. The guy looked super confused and said, "Huh? I told my mother that he's not a waiter. He was holding an envelope and a phone, not a clipboard or tablet." Not super exciting, I know. To be honest, I thought the shorts indicated that he was another customer. But the waitresses were all wearing denim shorts. Gotta love the Aussie summer. Brings out the very Aussie sartorial choices. I wouldn't be surprised if the next hipster bar has footy shorts and pluggers as their staff uniform. Alright, be honest, without looking it up, do you know what footy shorts and pluggers are? I definitely had to go and Google what footy shorts and pluggers were. Let me know if you already knew in the comments down below, because I feel like that's a very specifically Australian term to know. Our next story is by Weekend Wench. In keeping with the holiday season. This is an unusual IDontWorkHereLady story, in that I wasn't actually at a store or a place of business when this happened, but with the holidays coming back around, I was reminded of this story from last year. I received a bunch of texts from some random stranger on my cell phone shortly after Thanksgiving. When I looked more closely, I realized what they were. Some woman had sent me her unemployment logs and claims. It had all of her personal information: name, social security number, address, where she searched for jobs, and the outcomes for a 2-week period that she was claiming. She must have accidentally sent me this information, thinking that I was her unemployment claims caseworker. I called her right away, but had a hard time explaining that I was not some scammer, and that she in fact initiated the text chain. I told her that I was concerned that she sent me all of this personal information that was intended for her caseworker, and also that she might miss her claim deadline because it was sent to me instead of the rightful person. When she finally realized what had happened, she thanked me because it would have been awful if she missed her unemployment check so close to Christmas. She had a young daughter and she'd been out of work for several weeks already, and this was her first 2 weeks that she was allowed to claim. And we hung up. I was getting ready to delete the texts when I thought about her situation. I was a single mom for many years, struggling sometimes, most times actually. I've been unemployed and I know how bad it feels to not be able to buy the necessities, let alone something nice for the kids to enjoy at Christmas. I called her back. It took some convincing that, again, I was not some scammer. You texted me, remember? I've been in your shoes and I want to help. I was one of the fortunate ones who wasn't laid off during the pandemic. Essential worker, building supply, keeping the economy going and all that. I finally convinced her to allow me to Venmo her a couple $100. It wasn't much, but I'm hoping it helped her and her daughter. Oh, and then yes, I deleted her information. After such a crappy year of retail clients complaining, it was nice to help someone who actually appreciated it, even if I didn't work for the unemployment office. If I found myself in this situation where I have enough money to help somebody out, and somebody that just needs a little assistance or could probably really use it ends up popping up, I think it would come into my mind to try and help them out a little bit too. Hopefully what OP gave them went to a good cause and they were able to get something really nice for their daughter and really make for a memorable Christmas during even tough times. This next story is by OutdoorCat19. I do not work in this strip club. I've been browsing this sub for a while now, and I can't believe I've never thought to tell you guys the story of how, on my 18th birthday, I was mistaken for an employee at a strip club. It sounds fake, but I promise that it's not. Disclosure, this happened a decade ago. I was the last one to turn 18 in my friends group, so, on my 18th birthday, we decided to go out and do all the things you can legally do at 18 in the US. Buy cigarettes and lottery tickets and go to a strip club. Before going out, I was on the phone with a friend and I asked her what to wear. She said, "Dress for a night to remember." And my 18-year-old brain interpreted that as, "Wear a teeny tiny dress." Folks, this thing was skin tight and short with vertical black and white stripes, like an umpire or a prisoner in an old-timey cartoon. So I met up with my friends and they were all dressed much more casually than me. Miss Dress for a Night to Remember was in jeans and a t-shirt if I recall. But whatever, it was my birthday and I was dressed up. It was fine. We went to the strip club and were milling around on the floor, not knowing what to do. We lived in a fairly small college town, so the club was small and tacky. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to a middle-aged woman in all black. I assumed she was a manager. She asked, "Why aren't you in the dressing room?" Then must have immediately noticed her mistake because she said, "Oh, I thought you were a dancer." I'm not sure if I looked like one of the women who worked there or if she wasn't familiar with all of her staff. But either way, that was a lovely introduction to legal adulthood, and I don't think I ever wore that dress again. See, I don't know what OP did wrong here. They dressed up for a night to remember, and here they are over a decade later, talking about a night that they remember. Maybe just not for the reasons they would have expected. If you wore an outfit to someplace, and that outfit got you confused for an adult dancer, would you just start leaving that outfit in the closet in the future? It would definitely make me think. Our next story is by Lord of the Creep. Got cussed out while loading groceries into my trunk. So there were about 3 carts in a parking space across from where I parked in the Walmart parking lot, and I was loading my groceries in the trunk. Lady goes to pull into the space with 3 carts and stops, honks, waits, honks again, then gets out and shouts at me, "Why won't you just do your freaking job? Get these carts out of the way." As she's moving them violently, I tell her, "I don't work here." She replied, "Couldn't tell, how the heck should I know that? You should have done it anyway." I reply, "You should pucker up on my puckered parts cause I don't work here and I didn't put the carts there. Find another spot instead of cussing out a stranger." She replied, "I'm going to talk to management." I reply, "Be my guest." Have never laughed harder than when I drive past the entrance to see a woman standing there with someone who appeared to be a manager pointing angrily at me. Pucker up on my puckered parts, huh? What a beautiful command of the English language. I just failed to see what the management's going to do at all for this Karen. There's just no logic there. It somewhat annoys me that Karen can definitely paint this story however they want, and you just see the culprit just driving off. But it's also really not worth it to take time out of your day to try to fight whatever BS story this Karen's telling this manager. Good on OP for just going on about their day. Our next story is by Call in All Cars, Costco. Why don't you ask someone who works here? Turned out I'm actually the jerk. This is an old story from about 20 or so years ago. I stopped at Costco on the way home from work. I just came in looking for some electronics or whatnot, and so wasn't pushing a cart. And while in the electronics section, this older woman sees me looking over some items, and I can see she's interested in an item shelved near the one I'm looking at. I don't even remember what the items were. Anyway, she turns and asks me some very specific questions about the item she's looking at. I looked up at her and simply answered, "Sorry, I have no idea." A few minutes later, at the other end of the same aisle, the same lady comes up to me with some other item in her hands and asks me, "Do you know blah 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 about this?" Again, it was an item that I had no idea about. And at this point, I'm mildly annoyed and just answer, "Nope," and turn to go to browse the next aisle over. It's worthwhile, I think, at this point in the story to explain that I was working in northeastern New Jersey, basically a suburb of New York City, in a fairly stressful job, and one of the reasons I had even stopped at Costco was that my 12-mile ride home was mired in terrible traffic. Rather than spend the next 30 minutes trying to go the last 6 miles home, I bowled into the Costco I was about to crawl past, figured I'd do a little shopping, and let some traffic clear out while I did so. So I started this whole experience wound a little tightly. On top of that, this was when I was in my early 30s or late 20s, and I was a pretty big jerk back then. I've mellowed since, and partly due to this experience. Anyway, moving on, 5 minutes later, I'm nerding out over whatever thing I was looking at in the next aisle, and the woman comes around the corner from the other aisle where I'd left her, specifically walking past other customers to come to me to ask a third question about something I had no idea about. By now, I'm pretty annoyed. It's clear to me that she's not flirting with me or anything like that, and I can't understand why she keeps coming to bug me about these things when all I want to do is just waste a few minutes out of traffic. In all honesty, if I'd had any answers for her, I likely would have given them to her, but I didn't have those answers. In a reply to her question, I gave her a crappy look and said in a very condescending voice, "I have no idea, but maybe you ought to ask someone who works here." and made an overly dramatic gesture with my hands pointing towards one of the employees, rounding the corner at the edge of the electronics section about 20 feet away. The woman looked at me, somewhat offended, and didn't say another word. I didn't give a darn. Why couldn't this woman leave me to my nerding out? I left the electronics section and wandered off, and another 20 or so minutes of walking around and just avoiding traffic, picked up some grocery items or others and walked to the cashier line to pay for it. As my turn came up to pay, I pulled out my wallet looking for my membership card and couldn't find it. I knew I had to show it to get into the store and quickly checked all my pants pockets, no card. The cashier smiles at me and points to my chest. I know where she was pointing, and in a split second, I realized, maybe not for the first time ever, that I was a giant jerk. So my employer had access control on all the buildings, and you scanned your employee ID card at the door of any of these buildings to enter. Employees were obliged to display their IDs at all times while on work property. Many people wore the badge attached to one of those retractable cords that you clip to your belt. Some wore their badge on a loop of ribbon around their neck, and others, like myself, wore their badge in a transparent pouch that was designed to go clip onto a shirt or jacket pocket. My employer also required business attire, so on my way home from work, I was dressed in leathered soled shoes, pleated dress pants, a white button-down shirt, and a tie. Left the jacket in the car for the trip to Costco. Apparently, I also left my work ID badge holder still clipped to my shirt pocket. At that point in time, it wouldn't have been unusual for me to go in and out of the buildings at work a dozen or more times on any given day. After a year or so, it had become a well-practiced and unthinking motion for me to grab my work ID from the badge holder that held it on my shirt pocket, flash it to the door sensor, and just slip it back into the pocket on the holder as I entered the building. Apparently, when I pulled my Costco ID out of my wallet to get into the store, I unthinkingly placed it in my badge holder, since I'd forgotten to take that off and leave it in the car with my jacket, instead of back into my wallet. I'd been walking around the store looking like a manager with a badge displaying the Costco logo prominently in bright red letters right on my chest. As all of this realization came to me in the second or two after the cashier pointed out my Costco ID card I was wearing, my face went a little pale and she asked me if I was okay. I mumbled something about feeling dumb and this being a habit from work as I paid for my stuff. I hurried out of the store, hoping I didn't see the woman who'd been asking me questions. It began to dawn on me that if I weren't such a jerk coward, I'd go find that woman, explain to her what happened, and apologize to her for being so rude. Instead, I just left the store in shame, feeling about 2 inches tall. To be fair to OP, in that moment, in that situation, they didn't understand why the person kept coming up to them, kept asking them questions, so I feel like a lot of people would start getting off-put from that. I think the only real issue is you just didn't clarify that you didn't work there. For most reasonable people, you might say, "Oh, I don't work here," and they say, "Oh, really? You got an ID badge right there," and that probably would have cleared the whole thing up. So maybe the jerk reaction is what caused it. And our final story of the day is by New Joke 3626. Karen gets arrested. This happened a while back, but I can't resist posting to Reddit. I was 14 years old, male, but 5'11", 6 foot while wearing shoes. I went to a local grocery store with my parents that, let's just call A-Mart. It's a huge store, almost like a Walmart, and the employees wear black polo tees which say, "How can I help you?" As usual, my parents and I entered the store and split up to get our separate groceries. I was picking up some miscellaneous food items like chips, pasta sauce, sausages, etc. I'd found some chips in a flavor that I like, but not the brand that I wanted. The current brand's chips would have a weird aftertaste, and so I put the chips back on the shelf. Here comes a woman in her maybe late 40s or 50s asking me why the ready-made pizza rolls were so expensive. I told her I didn't know and that I didn't work here. I can kind of see why she thought I was an employee. I was wearing a Black Panther shirt which was mainly black. As soon as I said I don't work here, she screamed, "Don't try to fool me, I know you work here." Me, while shocked, say, "I don't work here, I'm just a 14-year-old getting groceries." A cashier from the front came and asked us what was wrong. Let's refer to the lady as Kay now. Kay said, "This employee assaulted me and refuses to help me." The employee, dumbfounded, says, "He doesn't work here." He then turned to me and asked if I assaulted her. I explained the situation to him and he had a look on his face. Something like, "I don't want to deal with this crap right now." He just then tells the lady to calm down and then goes back to the registers. The lady then throws a tantrum and runs her hand through the shelves, putting a bunch of food boxes on the ground and breaking several bottles. The cashier called the cops like any sane person would. I just stood there in awe. The cops arrived while she was screaming at me. I don't even remember what she said. We were both made to sit down while they looked through the security footage. Turns out Kay had been shoplifting and was caught putting several items in her handbag. When the cops tried to cuff her, she socked one straight to the face and her nose started bleeding. I don't know what happened next because I had gone back to shopping. The cashier told me she was charged with assault, larceny, I think that's what it's called, and vandalism. Not sure what happened to her. Well, I can guess a few things, and assaulting a cop is not going to get you very good results wherever you're going. That Karen probably made it way worse for herself. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.